What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast from Radio Row. I'm Phil Perry. We've got a great episode lined up for you today. A couple great guests. Lindsay Rhodes from Sumer Sports and the Fantasy Dirt podcast for Sports Illustrated. Also, Shawn Syed, also from Sumer Sports. Some big brains on the podcast here today. And the Stats and Schemes podcast. Both are fantastic. Both are fresh off the Senior Bowl. So, of course, here on the Next Pats podcast, we need to talk about the players that you should be keeping an eye on through the early pre-draft period here. Which players caught their eye at tackle, at receiver, on the edge. These are all obviously critical positions of need, I would argue, for the New England Patriots. So you're going to hear some names from them. Store them away in the back of your mind as we go through the process, and let's track and see how well these players are performing at things like the combine and throughout the interview process. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to talk to them here on the Next Pats podcast, and you'll be able to get a little better sense for who they are as people. But great conversations with both Lindsay and Shawn. First, I want to direct you to NBCSportsBoston.com. If you haven't been there already, we have a new mock draft. It's Monday here on Radio Row. It's a mock draft Monday on NBCSportsBoston.com. Last week, we gave you what might be considered by some to be sort of a worst-case scenario, where they still, in my opinion, take a very good player at a very important position, Will Campbell, the tackle out of LSU. This week, more of a quote-unquote best-case scenario, because after the Senior Bowl, the quarterback performance there in Mobile, not awesome. And so if you're looking for a quarterback in this year's draft, I think it's as clear as it's ever been. You got to grab one early. And so maybe there's a trade-up. We have a trade-up. The Raiders move all the way up to number 2 to make sure that they get a quarterback. The Titans at number 1 overall, they take Abdul Carter. The Raiders at number 2, they end up taking Cam Ward. A lot of people making that connection between Tom Brady, Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders. There's a relationship there. But to me, Cam Ward's the best quarterback in this year's class. So the Raiders, with Tom Brady directing the controls there, knows how important it is that they get a physically talented quarterback who can mold his game as he grows in the NFL. They trade up for Cam Ward. The Giants take Shedeur Sanders at number 3. Best case scenario for the Patriots. Obviously don't need a quarterback, and one of the 2 true blue chippers in this year's class falls to them at number 4 overall, and they take dual threat Travis Hunter. Could there be a more perfect fit for the New England Patriots, who have all of those needs to fill? They get a guy at receiver, they get a guy at corner, and 1 pick at number 4 overall. Now, is he going to be able to play at both spots full-time in the league? Probably not. And I would encourage him, if he's thinking about maximizing his financial opportunities as a pro, he may want to focus on receiver, and the Patriots would want him to focus on receiver, in my opinion, in order to give Drake May that weapon that he needs. And if he wants to moonlight at quarter, great. Critical situations, 2-minute, third down, you want to throw him out there on the field opposite Christian Gonzalez. You're going to hear Shawn Syed talk about what that pairing could mean on the defensive side for the Patriots moving forward. That would be scary. So, best case scenario, in my opinion, is that either Carter or Hunter fall all the way to number 4. You get exactly that in this week's mock draft. Now, let's get to our conversations with Lindsay and Shawn. We're going to start with Lindsay. A lot of fun. We talk about the Luka Doncic trade. We're talking about the Senior Bowl as well. Then you're going to hear from me and Shawn, and we're going to talk not only about the Senior Bowl and what he saw from one tackle prospect in particular that he got a chance to talk to a little bit down there in Mobile, Alabama, but we're going to talk about the Eagles as well, because Shawn covers the Eagles very, very closely, and there is a little bit of a blueprint, in Shawn's opinion, in terms of how the Patriots can build moving forward and the example that has been set by Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles that the Patriots might be able to try to replicate. Is there a market inefficiency in the trenches that the Patriots can try to exploit? We're talking about that with Shawn, but first, here's Lindsay, then you'll hear me and Shawn. All right, very excited now to have with us on the Next Pats podcast, Lindsay Rhodes of Sumer Sports and of Sports Illustrated. You're doing the Fantasy Dirt podcast there.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
So, Lindsay, you are really good with the Twitter engagement thing.
Oh.
Because you will occasionally ask some very fascinating questions.
Okay.
One involved bathroom stalls recently, which we might have to ask you about a little bit later. I don't want to be inappropriate right off the bat. I don't know,
which one do you choose?
Intel you are mining in that given situation.
There are apparently studies about which one is the cleanest, but the information's all over the map. People think it's different ones, so it may or may not have popped into my mind as I was trying to figure out which one was the cleanest I would crowdsource.
We might have to get your answer on that at the end, but I do want to ask you first. We'll just give you time to stew on it a little bit. Luka Doncic trade.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about it, even here at the Super Bowl on Radio Row.
It's all I'm hearing people in the background.
The Twitter followers, the Twitterverse, for a good NFL comp for that trade. And so now I have to get your take. Do you have a good comp?
So here's why I was asking. Not just because, like, let's share some ideas. Like, this was an example of me being like, hey, I'm actually incredibly ignorant. Please put this in terms I would understand. Because in the last, 5 to 10 years, I've followed the NBA less and less as I've just been, like, immersed in the NFL. I only have so much bandwidth. And so I just don't have extra space for, like, other sports. And so I didn't properly understand the outrage. And so I did. But I was also seeing a lot of comps. And the comps didn't make any sense to me. They were like, I can't even think of any. There were so many bad ones.
There were some bad ones. I agree with you on that front. I actually did think about this for like an unreasonable amount of time, and I still can't come up with a good one. Here's the thing. I'm making Luka Doncic like one of the best young quarterbacks in football, like MVP level quarterback. I think you have to start there. So
how old is he? He's 26?
He's 25 or 26.
Okay,
So
got
this
it.
guy's a little bit older, but I'm just going to go Lamar because Lamar hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. Same way Luka hasn't won a Super Bowl. You could, I guess, go with Joe Burrow because Luka at least made a finals. Joe Burrow made a Super Bowl and lost.
Okay.
So it's like one of those two guys for me. And then the Anthony Davis part of the trade, to me, can't be a quarterback because he's just like not that kind of player. Like Luka always has the ball in his hands.
Yeah, they're so different
very different
stylistically.
positions. Yes.
Everyone was going same position group.
No, I think you have to go. I think you have to go different position.
And he's an aging player.
And he needs to be a little bit older, which is really hard.
High caliber, but about to fall off maybe because he's old.
So you ready for this?
Who?
So this would be. Do you want to go Lamar or Joe Burrow? Because I'm still up in the air.
Let's go Joe.
Okay, Joe Burrow. This would be Joe Burrow. This guy's not aging, but he's older for DK Metcalf.
That is
mind-blowingly bad, right?
If that comp is even close to accurate, that is wild. Now I am outraged about this trade, just like everyone else.
So it's not great because because DK Metcalf you would never say is like an MVP caliber player, whereas Anthony Davis like early this season was getting like MVP buzz. So he's not. I guess you could go Saquon.
Okay, here's where I'm going to go.
What if it was Joe Burrow
No,
for
because
Saquon?
Saquon's young too. Saquon's young.
Yeah, okay.
You think he's old.
Yeah,
we've been talking about him forever, but he's actually not.
Okay.
Let's go with a defensive guy who has been a game changer, who has affected teams' abilities to win championships, but is older now so that it doesn't make sense in terms of the longevity that's left. Who's that guy?
Oh, I thought you had a name.
No, I'm
like,
spitballing.
wow, this is
I'm
great
spitballing.
Okay, yes, more. Okay.
Help me.
I'm like
Help
running
me.
through a
I'm trying to narrow
Rolodex
it
of
down.
faces and names in my
I'm
brain.
trying to get away from the DK wide receiver. Also, I don't know if DK was ever like the game changer. Anthony Davis has been a game changer.
He has been.
He's been so important.
How about this one?
Okay.
I have one. I have a name.
Yes.
This is good jazz right now. We were riffing right now for the people at home.
In New Orleans. Oh,
there should be a trumpet in the background right now. What if it was Joe Burrow for TJ Watt? Defensive Player of the Year.
He's really young, too.
Is he that young? But he's banged up. He's been banged up.
I feel like, how old
Listen,
is TJ
I can only
Watt?
give you so many comps that you just dump all over.
This is why they're all so bad.
Before I start to ask for your official comp. I know, it is really hard.
Older
it is really
defenders.
hard. Okay, in the comments below on YouTube, for everybody watching on YouTube, leave us a great comp there. Let's talk some actual football. You are fresh.
Trent Williams was another one that I saw that I actually think now it's not not defense, but it's absolutely vitally game changing. I
like that one.
But old.
And a little older.
I did see that. So that one, sorry,
no,
you were
I like
pivoting
that.
away, and then I came with the thing I should have said right out of the gate.
He doesn't maintain like the interconference trade, which is another part to that trade that makes it a little bit mind-boggling. But there's no perfect comp.
You need to add all these complicated layers.
There's no perfect comp. How about for the Senior Bowl? Any great comps there? What a transition by me. No, listen, you're fresh off the Senior Bowl. We talk a lot about the draft on this podcast and about what the Patriots might be looking for. Yeah. So Senior Bowl, Patriots have a lot of needs to fill, especially premium positions. What to you were the best positions there, sort of big picture in Mobile? So
the best positions there were edge. I would start with the edge group. Jim Nagy said early in the week that the cut line for the invites at edge was a 4th round grade.
Wow.
That's wild,
Yeah.
right? Like, so that means that everybody that was there is somebody that we're thinking might actually go day 1, day 2, early day 3. So the edge group definitely. Although there wasn't anyone in that edge group that felt like, oh my God, that guy won all the time
Right.
in such a high-end way. I didn't walk away with a name. Like, the name that I keep hearing so much is Mike Green, but because he had a viral clip where, he embarrassed Josh Connerly's family. But then Josh Connerly came back and was the O-line practice player of the week as voted on by his teammates. And so clearly that also is a lesson learned about what one rep means in the big picture of things. But Mike Green is also a lesson there because I think that he's a guy who had that incredibly big wow play. And this happened quite a bit. And then would there would be several plays where I think the consistency wasn't there. So I don't know that there's anyone there in that group that just went like, shoom, that person's skyrocketing up the charts. I think Mike Green is a guy who probably, like, people are maybe like a bottom half of the first round.
Okay.
Like a team there would be like the Lions. I'm picturing him as a perfect pick to put on the other side of an Aiden Hutchinson. If he's your number 2 edge, money.
I like that.
Tight ends, another good position group there and in this draft class.
It's an interesting draft because it feels like for the Patriots, they've got massive needs. They could use a player on the edge for sure, so depth on the edge is good news for Patriots fans. But boy, they need tackles, they need receivers, and it's like the strength of this draft, it sounds like, defensive line,
right.
What you're saying there, running back, tight end, it's like.
But so let me hit you with something different there. Don't
Patriots
go with
fans.
the strength. Don't go with the strength up top. The strength is where there's depth.
Okay.
Go get them later,
I see.
right? Because
Yep.
the drop-off is less. Now, what about Will Campbell for protecting Drake May, which I would say is priority number 1. Like, if you had to start the season without him on the field, at least in part maybe because you wanted to protect him, then I would say you need pass catchers for him. You need a bunch of different things. Priority number 1, get a line that can protect him. And then the wide receivers that you put out there don't even have to be as good. They're examples of that up and down the NFL this year. If you can build out that offensive line to be super strong and protect the investment you have in your quarterback, then you have a little bit more maneuverability with the talent level that you need to get at wide receiver, which obviously does need to be upgraded. But I would say like a Will Campbell is a really interesting pick for me at number 4 for the Patriots because I think that he will be there. It'll depend on like if Abdul Carter is still there or something like that, right? Then maybe you go in a different direction. But I would say Will Campbell because the other thing about the offensive tackles is, and this happened at Mobile, there's always, when you look at the guys who are coming in as offensive tackles, a massive conversation about, is he still an offensive tackle or does he need to move to guard? Or is he a center now? And I was talking to an offensive line expert who I really respect, and I said, who are the guys in this year's class that absolutely are tackles? And he gave me 4 names. And Will Campbell, I think, is at the top of that list. But the fact that there's only really 4, that somebody who studies these guys year-round and knows them intimately would say that is 100% a tackle in the NFL, I think that you need to get that guy.
Invest early.
Yeah.
And don't play around.
Because there aren't going to be many later.
I think that might be the best idea for them. When it comes to Senior Bowl receivers, now I understand the quarterback play, it sounds like wasn't awesome, so maybe a little hard to gauge exactly what was there in terms of the pass catchers, but if they do what you're talking about, get that lineman early, are there guys, maybe day 2, day 3, that played in Mobile that you said, oh, I could see that guy contributing because that's probably the kind of talent they're going to be looking for at that position, in the middle rounds?
So Jack Besh was the MVP of the game. He had a good week from TCU. Just a tragic story right now. His brother was killed on January 1st in the attack on Bourbon Street here, and he had a very, very good week. Who my favorite of the week, for a bunch of different reasons that actually just tell you all about how nerdy I am, was Tez Johnson from Oregon.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because I spent a lot of time deep in the data weeds, and I think that there's a lot of information that the data tells us about things that we're missing with our eyes. And this is a league that's been a very traits-based league for a very long time. I mean, if you went back 5 years and you just mentioned that this guy was 5'10", 156, people would be like, nope, not going to draft him. And it doesn't matter what he did in college because that won't work in the NFL. We heard that conversation within the last couple of years in like fantasy circles, people being like, I can't draft Tank Dell. He's too small. It won't work. I mean, up and
How about
down.
Devontae Smith? There were a lot of questions about whether or not he was a worthy pick in the first round.
So the thing about Tez that made me want to watch him in Mobile is that if you look at some of the advanced metrics that I think are very sticky when it comes to wide receiver, there's yards per route run, which is a very predictive stat. The people who are smarter than me have settled on that and told me that, the data scientists. So if you went look at like Puka Nacua and you said, how did we miss him? You missed by not trusting the data that was there and just evaluating him just with your eyes, because all of it was on paper to show us that he was going to be good in the NFL. If you looked at like a graph of all of the Senior Bowl wide receivers from the last 3 years, like upper right on the graph, I'm going to try and do this in reverse. It's like very good, bottom left, very bad, right?
Got it.
And so if you did yards per route run on this axis and first downs per route.
We're going to fill all this out in post-production. We're going to have actual lines.
There are cameras.
Like in front of
there
your
you,
face.
I like that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yes,
okay?
do that.
Get on that, Skull Crusher.
Good luck. This is coming out in 30 days. So Puka Nacua is like way up here all by himself. And then there's Tez Johnson, and then there's everyone else.
Wow.
So I was like, that's very interesting about Tez. And so then you want to put your eyes on him. What the numbers do is they just force you to ask more questions, right? So now let's go look and see, like, why are the numbers here? Does he fit any other, is it just the level of competition? He's at Oregon, probably not. And he was able to get separation consistently against the cornerbacks that were there in Mobile. So I think that he's a really interesting guy, and we've seen guys have some success at that size. Tank Dell's the perfect comp, right? Sure. The concern there is going to be Tank Dell also has been hurt. Can he stay on the field? And so he won't go like super high in the draft, but I think he could be a mid-round guy that's a massive value, so long as you have other pieces around him.
I love that. Great explanation.
The longest explanation ever.
No, that
Welcome
was tremendous.
To me.
We dive into some really nerdy stuff on this podcast, so that's great to know, and something we're going to have to track as the rest of the pre-draft process plays out. Speaking of data, we're going to get you out on this one.
Okay.
Teased it earlier. Any data on the best bathroom stall to use when you're trying to figure that whole thing out? It sounds like you've gone through some of the research.
I mean, well, what I found about the responses was...
There are advanced analytics on this.
was how everyone thought that they had a study that told them what the best one was, and they were all different ones.
Oh, God.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that was, don't think I didn't Google this first before I put this to Twitter, and I found different answers there too. Oh. So I don't know.
So there's no answer.
Which study is the most important study? I find that I go to the second stall, and I don't know why.
I feel like people avoid the first one, so that's the one I go to.
That is probably smart.
It's like a reverse psychology.
Yeah, everybody thinks like, oh, they're going to go into the first one because it's the quickest, but no one does because everyone thinks that everyone else thinks
You're
that.
also closer to everyone else that might be in that room, like at that time, which I think people have like a little bit of, fear
a lot of
maybe.
people answered that they went in the handicap stall, and so people were really comfortable outing themselves as being very 100%. Yes, shame on you, unless you're handicapped. But I think the large number of people who answered with that stall were not.
Probably were not. Lindsay Rhodes, amazing intel across a number of different fronts. We covered the NBA, we covered bathroom stalls, we covered the Senior Bowl and the NFL draft. Thank you so much for being with us. This was great.
Thank you for having me.
Very excited to welcome back onto the Next Pats podcast. Friend of the Next Pats podcast is Shawn Syed of Sumer Sports and also the Stats and Schemes podcast. Easy for me to say. Shawn, thanks for being with us, man.
Phil, I'm so excited. It's nice to talk on the computer, but when you get in person, you got a whole different energy.
No question about it. You've got a lot of energy this week because you have been covering the Eagles like nobody else. You know this team inside and out. This is a big week for people like you. One of the things I wanted to ask you about when it came to the Eagles was this. For the Patriots, who are obviously in rebuild mode, is there any kind of blueprint that they can try to follow by looking at the Eagles? The Chiefs a little harder, like get Patrick Mahomes and go from there, like easier said than done. But is there something of a realistic blueprint for the Patriots to follow when they see the Eagles in the Super Bowl again and say, We could do that.
You know, I would like to say just draft the good players, but I think that might be too simple. I do think when you think about the Eagles, they are certainly built through the offensive line. I think, you want to draft good offensive linemen. You want to consistently draft offensive linemen. It's never a bad idea to throw a dart at an offensive lineman. I do think, though, the Eagles have put themselves in situations where they're filling the holes in free agency so they can go into the draft taking the best player available. Quinyon Mitchell's the top player on their board at that time. They really like Cooper DeJean. They move up to get him. So if you're in a situation where you're like the Patriots, and look, I go on these other places and I can't say you figured out the quarterback position. Here you have. So you can fill some of those holes in free agency. Maybe you throw some money at Trey Smith at that guard spot, fill that, so you can just draft the best player that's available at that fourth pick.
Is there anything to the size of the Eagles' offensive line, and maybe that being something that is, if not replicable, at least a plan? Because it really is interesting in a league where, and you cover the X's and O's so thoroughly, this is a league now where it seems as though athleticism on the offensive line is supremely valued, especially for these West Coast schemes that want to get horizontal and use those one-cut running backs and have that West Coast style of run game. The Eagles, they've got some great athletes too, don't get me wrong, and so they can do a number of different things, but those guys are freaking massive. They're giants all the way across the line. Is that something that's worth pursuing? Is there any little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? This is good. This is why this is good for a podcast. This is the stuff that Bill Belichick used to say all the time. Market inefficiency. There we
There
go.
you go.
Holy
Phil,
smokes,
we worked
my
and we
brain
got
is
that.
still
I
not
like that.
functioning.
I mean, it's a little
But
bit
is there
early,
a market inefficiency where other teams might look at the 6'6", 340-pound lineman and say, not going to fit our scheme? Like, should the Patriots be looking at those guys because the Eagles are proving, like, if you've got big human beings, that tends to help up front?
To me, it feels like the market inefficiency is having the best offensive line coach in the game, and the Eagles have Jeff Stoutland. So where you see Mekhi Becton, who's a great example, that dude has a tackle's body. He is playing right guard for the Eagles this year. He might be a player that, the Patriots look at in free agency. I do think if you have big guys on the interior, the Rams, they tried to make that sort of movement where you're building the interior of the pocket. I mean, I know everyone's thinking about Tom Brady, where you have that really strong inside of the pocket. I think that will really help Drake May. So I do think that could be a spot where you look at this draft class a little bit and you see some guys that they play tackle at the college level. Maybe they bump inside to guard, but if they're bigger guys and they're inside, I do think that's a way that can help you in the run game, that can help you in the pass game as well.
Okay, flip it over to the defensive side. Again, perfect person to talk scheme with. The scheme is going to change in New England under Mike Vrabel. Bill Belichick, Gerard Mayo running the same defense essentially. So heavy on man-to-man defense, so heavy on cover one, cover three, those single high safety looks. We know with Devin McCourty for years and years and years, he was just playing in the post full time. They didn't really have that player this past year, which is probably one of the reasons why the defense wasn't as good. But it sounds like they may turn into more of a two-high team this coming year with Vrabel. Terrell Williams be the defensive coordinator, another Tennessee Titans guy. Back in 2013, last time Vrabel was head coach in Tennessee, they were 7th in the league in two-high safety rate. All that being said, Vic Fangio and that scheme, again, something that is spread league-wide. Is that the right way to go? Is it the right decision in 2025 in the NFL to be more of a two-high team?
In two-high, it can just mean two-high before the snap. So you can rotate a safety down and still play all of that cover one that Vrabel wants to do, all of that cover three type looks. I do think at this point in the long history of football, you're looking at teams that they want to pass the ball. Right, obviously you have to stop the run first to try and rush the passer. But in the passing game, when you're prioritizing what spaces on the field you want a team to throw to, get them to throw into the flat, rally to the ball. I do think that's a sound approach. That's how the Eagles have approached it in a lot of ways. I do think Vrabel has a defensive mind. I enjoy watching his film and just the different ways where you're starting in too high. You're like seeing some of their old games against Travis Kelce, for example, the way that you're rotating someone down there. So I do think it's a smart movement in terms of approach. I do think it depends on obviously what players you have, who you're bringing in there, because I mean, like, you're going to have to be a coverage linebacker at a lot of times, and no one wants to cover at the linebacker spot. It's just too hard against some of these players in the league.
And some of the linebackers they have right now are not exactly coverage linebackers. They're these big, burly, Bill Belichick-style linebackers, 250-plus pounds, Jawan Bentley, Jelani Tavai, that like to get downhill and play the run. So it will be interesting to see just personnel-wise how they fill that out. Let's talk a little draft. Right before we came on here, a little bit of news broke. Apparently, Myles Garrett has asked for a trade. Okay, so the Patriots are sitting at pick number 4 overall. And I'm going to have a suggestion for the Patriots, for you, in terms of actually making a selection at pick number 4. But before we get to that, Myles Garrett, 4th overall pick. Patriots call the Cleveland Browns today and say, we'll offer you number 4, straight up for Myles Garrett. Who says no?
I think the Browns say no. I think the Browns say give me more than that. I do think that with the number 4 pick, as a Patriots fan, you're hoping for like the best possible outcome on the defense side is a Myles Garrett type player for the long run. Of course, there's contracts and all that, but you have a rookie quarterback deal where that lets you make these types of moves. So I'm 100%. I'm making that call. I'm offering number 4. I'm seeing, make them say no. I do think Andrew Berry probably says, what about your 1 from next year? What about a 1 and a 3? For next year, so that starts to, maybe move it just a little bit. Someone is going to throw a lot of draft picks. I'm thinking about the Commanders. Imagine Dan Quinn having Myles Garrett, but I'm not sure if Cleveland will end up trading him, but you have to make that call. You have to make them say no to some kind of offer.
That is wild draft capital to be giving up for a non-quarterback.
It absolutely
right?
is.
But that's almost, it's quarterback type of value.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he's almost that level player on the defensive side?
He's the defensive player of the year candidate every single year. And to rush the passer at that level, like Phil, I try and watch as much film as I can. He moves different. He really, really does. I'm scrolling through the film, and it feels like he is transporting through sometimes. It is wild to see. So I do think he is the player that you're going after. Like we talk about before the Vikings extended Justin Jefferson. Obviously, that's an offensive player. It's a little bit different, but there are premium players in this league that you absolutely have to make that offer for. Because, you look at who you're going to take at that 4th spot. Maybe it's a defensive player. Someone's going to draft Abdul Carter early in this draft, and, I think that, maybe you take a little bit more of a known quantity even in Myles Garrett there.
No question. And if you're going to be more of a too-high team, would help a lot. And somebody who could rush the passer.
The pass rushers are,
win a couple of one-on-ones by himself, maybe a couple of 2-on-1s. He is that good. If they keep the pick and they end up taking Travis Hunter with the 4th overall selection, say 2 quarterbacks go in the top 3, say Abdul Carter is somewhere in the top 3. We just posted a mock draft, NBCSportsBoston.com. If you're watching this and you haven't already looked at the mock draft, shame on you. Go do that right now or as soon as the podcast is over. Travis Hunter to the Patriots at 4th overall. Is that good value, in your opinion?
I love it. Just because thinking about Christian Gonzalez, who's one of my favorite players in this league, him on one side, Travis Hunter on the other side, you have really set your defense up in such a positive direction. To me, Hunter at cornerback, that's where I want him. You get him some snaps at receiver. I know he wants to play both ways at the next level. Can you have him play every single snap of the game? I hope he can. I'll let that up to a team like the Patriots to be able to decide. I do really like Hunter in that spot. I think maybe, you start to look at, hey, if there's still a quarterback available, do you want to maybe trade back to 6? Can you get the Raiders to give you a little bit of extra capital? Patriots are obviously, they're going to be building. They're going to be building maybe for a little bit. So, I would be happy with Hunter in that spot. I think people will talk about Tet from Arizona, the receiver. People will talk about Will Campbell, just to bring in some sort of offensive lineman. I do think maybe later on you can also pull some offensive lineman. I'd be more than happy taking Travis Hunter at that spot.
I'm curious, if Travis Hunter needs to focus on one position, what's more valuable?
It's hard because if you're thinking about just from Travis Hunter, if you're looking at just what positions are getting paid, you get paid more playing receiver.
Right.
I do think, though, if you're just looking at what level he's higher at, to me, it feels like he's a higher level corner than he's a receiver. He can play receiver in the league. I don't want to pretend like he can't. I just think his value at cornerback, I keep thinking about, Phil, Christian Gonzalez on one side, Travis Hunter on the other side. Throw Myles Garrett in there for fun. Like it is really a defense that I think that as a quarterback, like which side are you really feeling comfortable with? If you're playing, man coverage to one side and zone coverage to the other side, where Hunter can be playing with his eyes in different ways, that to me is a really formidable secondary, really building out.
That would be a lot of fun. And then you sprinkle in a little Myles Garrett too, and now all of a sudden we're in fantasy land. But it's fun to talk about right now during Super Bowl week here on Radio Row. Last thing I wanted to ask you, because I know you're fresh off the Senior Bowl there with Sumer Sports. You had a chance to talk to one of, to me, is the most interesting players at the Senior Bowl, was one of the most interesting players at the Senior Bowl because of the position he plays and where he might be available. This is not, generally speaking, someone who's thought to be a first-round pick, but it's Anthony Belton, the tackle, NC State. You had a chance to catch up with him, talk to him a little bit. What did you make of his week down there in Mobile?
I love being able to talk to them, see their thought process. I thought he was a really thoughtful guy. He was talking to me about feeling out like when a player's about to hit their spin move. It felt like he had a really good process in terms of feeling defenders attacking him. So I like that. I was impressed with how he was dealing with spin moves, how he was dealing with power, how he was flipping sides, I don't think he had ever taken a snap as a guard. They bump him into guard. He looks comfortable immediately. And that kind of versatility, I think that would be really important for a Patriots team. So I was impressed from him. And then we look at some of our Sumer Sports AI metrics based on what he did in college. He graded out really well as a blocker. So I think that is a player where he's going to start creeping up boards where we say now, hey, he might be available, in that late end of day 2. He might, I think, creep up just a little bit because I really enjoy talking to him.
That's really interesting. It would be fascinating to know if the Patriots felt as though he was getting to a place where maybe they even needed to trade up from where they are at the top of the second round into the very bottom of the first to get somebody like that. Are there any other under the radar guys that you have access to so much great data? And so without giving anything away, the proprietary information, is there anybody who's sort of on your radar that might not be on other people's that plays, whether it's that offensive tackle position or maybe the receiver position? Those are the two spots that we're looking at the most here.
Yeah, one, definitely Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. He had a really good week at the Senior Bowl. It was another person fun to talk to. And Phil, I don't want to be biased and, hey, this guy seems nice to me and I like him. It wasn't just that. The way he played with his hands, that was really good. I think Ariante Ursary, he's on more people's radar. I don't want to pretend like he's an under-the-radar player, but that's another player where, most likely to be at tackle. Maybe you bump them in at guard, and now we have that big guard we were talking about earlier just now about having, a bigger player inside. I do think there are a bunch of players that you're going to be able to fit in those spots. A lot is going to depend on their transition, what is their comfort playing on the left side versus the right side, and sort of seeing from there.
Last thing before we let you go. Who's going to win the game?
Phil,
Chiefs, Eagles.
Who
you got?
I think the Eagles are going to win the game. I really do. I think back to, obviously, the last time they played, against the Chiefs. Also, they played against the Patriots. You win with the defensive line there. I'm sorry to bring that up. I know I didn't want to have to.
Listen,
I didn't want to have to.
Believe me,
you were kind enough to have me on.
We watched that Eagles defensive line. One joint practice. They used to do like 2-3 joint practices in a training camp. One joint practice, Patriots Eagles at Gillette Stadium. It was. I'm not going to overhype it here, but it was a massacre. The defensive line. Best defensive line, arguably, in football against arguably the worst offensive line in football in August. Like before the offensive line even had any sort of chance to gel or anything. I think in the competitive team reps, there was something like 11 sacks in one day of practice where there's only like 25 competitive snaps like total. It was obscene. So you don't have to talk up the Eagles defensive line to me, but you think they're going to end up dominating this game.
Yeah. I mean, Brandon Graham, he's going to come back for this game. That could be a really big story. I do think when you look at the way the Eagles played the Chiefs last season, obviously in the Super Bowl a few years ago, now that is a little bit far back. The Eagles' defense is so good at this point. I think they're the best defense in the league right now. I think they have the best defensive coordinator in the league. Maybe not if you consider Steve Spagnuolo, but to me, it feels like when you think about how the Bills played the Chiefs, where the Bills were able to make just enough stops to put their offense in a positive situation, it's going to come down to Jalen Hurts making just, like he needs 3 throws. 3 throws on the money that he's going to be able to make. I do think the Eagles are going to be able to run the ball on the Chiefs. I keep thinking about how the Bills were able to do that too. Mm-hmm. It feels like the Eagles are a little bit better than the Bills. You're not playing an Arrowhead. To me, it feels like, this is a time. Let's not get the 3-peat. Let's break them down there. I think the Eagles are going to be able to win.
All right, you heard it here first. Shawn, Syed, Sumer Sports. Patrick Mahomes, overrated. I didn't think we were going to get that take this week, but we just get – no, I'm just kidding.
Don't say that to my boss.
Fantastic work from Shawn. Always great to talk to you, man. Have a great rest of the week here on Radio Row.
Thanks so much, Phil. Appreciate it.
Great stuff there from both Lindsay and from Shawn. So fun to talk to smart people, which we're going to be doing every single day here on Radio Row in New Orleans. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of great guests. We're going to be able to string out some of these interviews. You're going to be hearing some of these interviews weeks from now. Don't worry. We're going to have all kinds of fantastic content for you this week, both on the Next Pats podcast and on the Patriots Talk podcast. Don't forget, we're still on early edition every night. We've got a Quick Slants episode this week as well, Boston Sports Tonight. It's all live coming at you from New Orleans. We're going to try to limit the fried food consumption because I think it's already started to deteriorate some of the cells in my brain over time here. Never mind the frozen drinks that I haven't even dipped into just yet. It's my first time in New Orleans. We're going to try to keep the guardrails on here on Bourbon Street and elsewhere throughout the city. It's a fantastic city. It's a fantastic host city. If you have a chance to come down here for a big event, they know what they're doing. Just like you know what you're doing when you come to the Next Pats podcast. Thanks so much for listening to this edition. We'll hopefully have another one for you very, very soon here. Again, all kinds of tremendous guests. If you haven't already, please, please, please rate, comment, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Leave a comment on the YouTube page. All of our YouTube viewers, we love you. We mean it. We'll talk to you again very soon.